So here we are again, amazingly enough.
Day 3.
Day 3. So, I'm Brian Osborne, and you are?
I'm Dustin Neese.
Okay.
And here we go. Yeah, on day 3, we're rolling. And today we're going to talk about taking all the stuff that you've written out in long form and distilling it down into something a little bit more simplified and focused.
Right, because once you're in that state, you know, it's hard to read 6 pages of notes.
Right.
So, it's a practicality aspect, and remember
I'm meditating, and here's 6 pages floating in front of me.
Right.
No,
right.
No, you're not going to do
Not going to happen.
Not yet.
And it is true. A lot of the sayings that we use and people use all the time, and we don't always realize that they come from basically a magical practice background, right? So where do you think the term "a picture's worth 1,000 words"? You know, so symbol. The subconscious deals in a symbolic language, just like in a dream, right? So we get the symbols of a lot of things. The things that are in there, it's rare when a dream actually is a literal representation of whatever's going on. It's a symbolic representation of something that's going on in your mind that the conscious mind hasn't been able to come up with an answer for, or one that it's happy with. So it's looking for a way to do that, but it gives it to you in a symbol, because to actually explain it to you is like us trying to explain what do you want and why do you want it in 3 short videos.
Right.
It's almost an impossibility. So but we're doing our best to try. Yeah. So the idea is, again, that, you know, rending all of those pages, or, you know, just a few simple notes, instead of memorizing those words, it's capturing that feeling and bringing that feeling to some type of symbol, which could be it could be anything, right? I mean, some people, the essence or the basic essence of talismanic magic, right, is to take a very broad or a pointed end result and rend it into a symbol that represents that in some way, shape, or form, usually only to the practitioner himself, right? So that way it's a focus. It makes your mind focus on a very specific thing. It contains it in a way, and then projects that into the world for you. So the same thing with this. I have this feeling that I've come up with, right? I have the what I want. I have the why I want it as a feeling. How do I combine those two things to represent that in a nice, concise picture? And the picture doesn't have to be a visual picture, but it could be, right? And of course, in this short series, we don't have enough time to go into all of the, you know, elements of classical talismanic magic, right? So of building the talismans, how they work, you know, configuration, geometry, blah, blah, blah. All of the things that go into that as a formal training. But we can do it in a very, you know, nice and simplistic way that will have a very strong effect in the same idea. I mean, remember, those things came from an era when those symbols meant something to the practitioner. You know, in this day and age, if we're going to use that, you know, we have to understand and learn that language, right? But we have the language. Our symbolic language is, you know, cinema and all kinds of pictures, and, you know, we have great photography and great paintings, and, you know, lines in poetry, right? And we have music that's readily available for us, or pictures of memories in our life that, you know, just completely saturate us with that feeling, and maybe even the visual of what do we want and why do we want it. So search for something like that. That's usually the thing that I would look for most if I were doing it on the spur of the moment. If I had to do this quickly, if I didn't have days to do this, I would be looking for a symbol that represented that in some way, shape, or form for me. That when
your completed result.
My completed result, as if it's already happening, because of course I have the picture that's already happened, right? So when I hold that picture and I know that that's there, it elicits the feeling from me and the visual from me of that being complete, already here. That's the end result, is the feeling that I'm going to get from that being created, right?
I think a big stumbling block when it comes to this, at least it was for me, is just the idea that, you know, certain symbols represent certain things, and then there's, of course, the whole, people might take, instead of lines of poetry that they find personally meaningful, they might feel like it's necessary to use a quote from a sacred text or something like that, or whatever. And I know that this is a deep topic, but can you just talk briefly about the importance of personalizing it and over, any other, priority?
Right. I mean, if you've been indoctrinated into a system, or you've practiced a system, any system, for any length of time, and you've adopted that as your own, you want to use the correspondences that go with that system, because you're already going to have some, if you try to use something else, you're going to have breakers that are thrown mentally within you that say, well, that doesn't make sense with what I already know, or what I've already kind of conditioned myself to believe. Right. Or understand, at least. Believe
right.
might be a little bit too much, but understand at least to be to be what it is, right? So stick with what you know. Start with that point, And if you've just fooled around and you've fooled around,
or if you don't have anything.
If you don't have anything, or you've just sort of been all over the boards and experimenting with different things, and you don't have a fixed idea, then yes, pick something. You want to pick something that's personal to you. So and it can be anything. Don't, again, we're going back to the, sort of like the idea of don't be too judgmental with yourself. It's like, it's going to be personal for you. So and you're the only one that's going to know what's going on here. So,
and you're the only one that it has to work for.
You're the only one it has to work for. And you're not looking for anybody else's approval. Not anybody physically here, and not anybody not physically here. You're not looking for anyone else's approval. Throw that idea out of your head, and your work
it's
is
not
going to
like
be much better.
The universe is going to respond to certain symbols over other symbols,
no.
or certain images or sounds or words.
No.
The ultimate importance is that it has an effect on you.
Correct. That's why if it all worked universally, right, there'd be one song in the world.
Right.
Right.
Or one song for every emotion.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah. There you go.
It's
so it'd be
happy song.
There's happy song. That's right. There's sad song. It's like
and
every country song you ever married. So it's like, but still.
But it is a sticking point, because if you...
Yeah, because you start, but then that's a judgment, right? That some symbols are more powerful than other symbols.
Yes.
And that's not the case. I've used plenty that were what would be considered nonsensical to most people in the traditions, and they worked exquisitely for me. So, and my students as well. So again, to personalize it is a step that's really, we think a lot about that. But in the beginning, again, because this is so sort of cursory, and I want you to have an effect. I want you to have the effect to see how this works. We're doing it sort of guerrilla style, quick and dirty. I use what I have around me. So I can pull up images on the internet, or I have images around my house that embody that feeling. Again, we're going after the feeling
of the end result.
Of the end result accomplished. Right? So that's the idea. So that end result accomplished, I can see something that brings a tear to my eye, or I remember a song or a line of poetry that just embodies that, and I viscerally feel it in my body.
How is this different than a vision board?
A vision board is more of, it is in some ways like that, but a lot of times with a vision board, I don't have the visceral response. It's more like, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and I want this. And if I put it in my mind, if I put it in a place where I'm going to see it, but then after a while, it's like that note on the refrigerator that says, take out the garbage. Pretty soon it becomes the invisible note. It still says, take out the garbage, but you don't see it. And that sort of gets into your subconscious, right? So the vision board images tends to get into your subconscious, and after a while, my problem with that is that if I'm not working toward that, that can become something that just creates more desire that's unfulfilled, and so it can kind of drive you down rather
more
than
bashing.
Yeah, you're more bashing, right? It's
More
like,
negative instead of
I
positive.
didn't get my, whatever. I don't have my Ferrari. It's like, so yeah. So it's a little bit too removed. It's a little bit too sort of like out of the way. This is
And do
very
you find
personal.
that it's also unfocused?
Unfocused. It's very spread out because people put everything on their vision boards, right?
Got to make sure you get
their
it all on
imaginary bank accounts, their imaginary homes, their imaginary vehicles, their imaginary family or spouse or whatever, their harem, whatever. So whatever it is, right? This is, they put everything on there, and so you have only a certain amount of energy, at least right now, let's say, to pour into that. And so, when it's dissipated in many different places and unfocused, it becomes the difference between, a 60-watt light bulb and, a laser beam. The effect, I get some light and I can sort of see, but I'm not going to see the detail. It's still sort of dull, right? And it takes a long time for a 60-watt light bulb to sort of illuminate every little aspect of the room, right? And at the same point, and how far does that spread out light reach, as opposed to a laser that's so finely focused and maybe only a couple of millimeters in diameter, right? That same amount of power focused that way can extend for miles. Hence, everybody not wanting people to buy the laser pointers and shine them at the planes that are landing, right? It's blinding the pilot. I mean, if they were so weak, that would seem to have no effect, but it's so focused that it does have an effect. In this case, a detrimental effect. We don't want to do that. But it's the same idea. If I were to take a 60-watt bulb with a painter's, flange on it and shine it up at the plane, they wouldn't even be able to see it. It wouldn't be enough light to actually make a difference.
Right.
You'd look like a firefly on the ground. So
Sure.
That's the difference between, to me, a vision board is more like that 60-watt bulb where, this is more like a laser. It's very focused and has that really strong impact on the end result. I'm able to really bring up that feeling in relief to the background.
Do you have any preference for like linear symbols, like a drawing or a photograph, or like a three-dimensional image in your mind, or because a lot of people, that's the other thing, is when you're imagining a result complete, I think a lot of the time we feel like we have to make sure we get everything in. Right.
And again, for us, I mean, that's why we want to limit, the what do we want, make it more specific.
Yeah.
And then, but it's really, and that's the electric impulse that we send out, and the magnetic response that comes back is due to how well the feeling is conducted, right? So the feeling of the event that, the feeling of the creation already happened, and so I'm making that feedback loop. So really, I'm only trying to get something that, yes, embodies that, whatever it is. In the beginning, it's easier if it sort of represents in some way the thing that you want, but more the feeling that it emotes, that brings up that feeling within you. So, however that is, some people, if they're auditory, it may be a piece of music that they hear when they're in that state.
And how do we anchor that symbol to what we've written out and what we've stated that we're trying to produce?
Right. Again, the only thing that you need to know is that the symbol is the sort of the essence of the what I want and why I want it. But more so in the why I want it, it's the strong feeling that is going to promote that drawing back. I can send my thoughts out all the time. I mean, prayer is sending thoughts out all the time, right? And crying out in the wilderness and all of these things, right? It's sending thoughts out. But is there really any strong feeling on the way back that that's already been done? that part's the lost part. That's the part that's left out most times. So it's really, the symbol helps you to focus and sort of illuminate that in a way with the feeling that's produced by that visual, or by the music piece, or by the piece of poetry that you read, and it's just so eloquent and encapsulates, the feeling that you're going to have with that thing already being accomplished.
And just in having the idea in mind that you're choosing a symbol to represent a result completed, and the feeling that it brings up in you, that's enough to communicate to your subconscious, the complete picture of the end result. It's not like you need to do something special to make sure that your subconscious knows that this symbol represents this whole thing, and it's not going to leave anything out. It's going to get it just right, like that whole thing. Because once you're in meditation, and obviously we're going to utilize this symbol in other exercises and other practices,
or at least the idea of a symbol to represent it in some way, shape, or form. Right. So
it's like you don't want to get into that place where you're like, again, I want to make sure it's all right. I didn't leave anything out.
And so it sort of brings up a good point that the time to do logic and reason or analysis is when you're choosing the symbol. But once you have it, and you know that when you see that, or when you hear that, it brings up that feeling strong
of the result complete.
That's not, the analysis is done at that point. When you're in that meditative place, you're not analyzing. Meditation and analysis do not go together.
Right.
They're two separate things. Meditation is holding, a single thought, or no thought, or holding an end result, or holding a feeling, right? But there's no analysis involved in that. That part's done already. Don't confuse the two. Don't, and a lot of people do. They'll get into their meditative space and they'll start to relax and entrain to that openness, that place of pure potential, and then all of a sudden the thoughts start bombarding them and start going, it's like, what about this? What about this? Don't forget this, and I don't want to forget that, and oh my gosh, what is going to happen if I do this, and that's going to have this end result, and do all that ahead of time, so that when you step into that place, that doesn't come up, and there are practices to make sure that doesn't happen, and that's a big part, it's like people smoosh all this stuff together, technical term, smoosh, we smoosh it all together, and it becomes this big chaotic ball of crap, basically. And everybody wonders why it didn't work. I said all the right words and I had all the right things, but you didn't have control of your mind to be able to insulate yourself from those other thoughts, and to be able to hold a single thought or a single feeling in your mind that for an extended period of time, or even for a second. There was always something knocking on the door. And so, just like
I know this
we talked about with the distractions, right? It's like we didn't go, oh, geez, it's like kids and dogs and family. No, it's like these things are around us constantly, and we have to deal with them in one way, shape, or form. We can deal with them in a negative way, or an aggravated way, or we can deal with them in a loving way, and sort of work within that parameter. That's part of the background noise for me. That's part of the background noise that's great for me. It helps me to focus on what I'm doing, and it's not a distraction. It actually, that's my white noise. It's a comforting thing. It's like, that's my anchor. It lets me go farther because I can feel that in the background. That's sort of, for me, that's what it is. Anybody can meditate in a secluded temple someplace. Anybody can do that, surrounded by like-minded people all trying to do the same thing, except for the guy snoring in the corner. Everybody wants to blanket party him later. But other than that, that's it, right? So, but to be able to do the same thing in a busy parking lot, that's skill, in my opinion. Because we don't live in those situations. Most of us. We live in places where there's life going on. And so we need to be able to function within that. I mean, if somebody wanted to move into one of those temple locations, that's one of the easiest things to manifest in the world. Give all your shit away, get a plane ticket and go there and knock at the door and become one of those guys. It's not difficult. They take people like that on a pretty regular basis. So, to be able to live in this world and to be able to hold that state of, mental clarity and to be able to produce what you want in your life, that's skill. So,
and the work of being able to do that is not just in the exercises that, the meditation exercises, I mean, but also in the prep work of organizing your thoughts and simplifying them into, like this, a visual form or an auditory form, a symbolic form.
Right, because it's a hell of a lot easier to bring up a single symbol that represents 1,000 pages of words, right, than it is to memorize 1,000 pages of words and in an instant when something's going off the rails in your office to try to recite that 1,000 pages of words. Right? You can memorize the Tao Te Ching, you can memorize the Bible, you can memorize those books, but try to siphon through them while the shit's hitting the fan in the office and find the right thing to come up with. But a symbol that can represent that, can bring everything, can organize your subconscious in a way that produces an immediate response and an immediate correct response. That's the value of it. Yeah.
Perfect.
So your job, your mission, if you choose to accept it, on day 3, is to find a symbol that represents the feeling of your creation already produced. So what is that? How does it feel to you? The why you wanted something. The what you want, why you want it. You've established that. What is the feeling that brings to you? What's the visceral sensation? What's the emotion that's attached to that? And feel it deeply. And then find a symbol. Again, whether it be a visual symbol, whether you produce something yourself that does that, that's fine. A picture, a piece of music, a piece of poetry, whatever. It can be a single word. It could be anything that you feel embodies that as completely as possible. That when you imagine that symbol, it's going to immediately bring you to that place of that creation already complete. And then take it, look at it, study it, attach that emotion to it, and work with that on a day-to-day basis.
And so important not to overanalyze or to second guess yourself.
No,
because it's so easy to do.
Oh, it's so easy. It's a trap. It's one more trap that you get locked in that loop, and you just overthink things that never gets done. It's paralysis by overanalysis.
The only question that's relevant, would you say, is does this symbol elicit the feeling of this end result already be completed or not?
Sure. I think that's it in a nutshell.
And trusting that, not needing to know that or have outside approval again that it's
the symbol,
a good symbol,
or
a powerful symbol, or an all-encompassing symbol, or whatever. Right. Or that it doesn't have anything in there that's gonna like screw it up or throw the breaker, or
No, none of that. It's gotta just elicit the feeling. Yeah, that's all it needs to do for you. That's all. It's only got to be meaningful for you. That's it.
Awesome.
And then we'll work with that.
Okay. Have fun with it.
Yeah. Do your best.
See you tomorrow.